Rockstar Principles podcast. Nick and John, we're back this week, week two. It's already two in a row. I call that consistency. I think we're in pretty good shape here. What are you thinking, John?
Season three, getting off to a strong start, baby.
And remember last week before we really got kicking, we were talking about how we're the old folks in the podcast world now, as opposed to when we were blazing the trail.
Yes.
Trying to look over the different platforms and social media and like just trying to get eyes on the product now. It really is a different world. I mean, TikTok and YouTube and all the different things. It's a lot.
The funny part has been just the way people are discovering that we're back at it. People messaging us saying they either saw a post here or, uh, you know, I did tell my wife I wasn't keeping a secret from her, but it was funny because she was just scrolling through TikTok and one of our videos popped up. She like sent me a screenshot of it. It's pretty funny. So yeah, it's a whole new world, my friend.
It's a brave, brave new world. But we are back. John, we got lots to talk about tonight, so we should get right into it. What do you want to talk about first here?
So one of the things that has really been on my mind a lot lately, as not at the end of my career, certainly, I hope not at least, but on the backside of my career for sure, is just the shortage, shortage of educators. It's really become a serious issue the last couple of years, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it, and I guess we'll talk about some of that. But I also think the implications, the snowball effect that it's leading to with higher ed, not higher ed, excuse me, administrative positions, principal positions, even superintendent positions. I think we're really going to begin to see the ramifications of that in the near future.
It's funny, we had talked about this a little bit when we started out back in 2013, especially in Pennsylvania, because the retirement system, which was such a big, attractive part of becoming a teacher, where, the money might not have been as great and, there were certain gives, but at the end of it all, 35 years later, you would have a very stable and set pension. And that system changed quite a bit in 2013. And we did see a dip, shortly after that in terms of enrollment into preparation programs and things like that. And then post COVID, with a slew of educators who left the profession, I think that was phase two, or felt like it at least. We were dipping pretty low when we were looking in those pools. And then the longevity piece as well. You would look at some research, and I don't know how much of it I trust during the
Yeah.
pandemic or post pandemic. But from what we could see anecdotally, the hiring pools dried up quite a bit. And from an administrative standpoint as well, we both hired several times for assistant principals, and we're both fortunate to be in a district that does well financially, and people can make a really good living here. But even just from an application perspective, it was a lot lower than it was in the past.
Yeah, and the scary part is just that, in addition to the hiring process and how challenging it's becoming, the poaching that's taking place from district to district is really, the signing of free agents from one school district to another is just off the charts now. Districts. I don't want to presume that they're recruiting people and specifically poaching people that way. But you do see, you and I have both experienced in talking to our principal friends. We've heard a lot of people who have been in the business for a number of years. It used to be once you were in a school for a good 5, 6 years, you kind of had roots there and you really didn't have reason to leave. But districts are doing things to poach people and attract them because they recognize the fact that the pool is getting shallow and the amount of people out there is getting more and more of a challenge, especially in certain, specific fields where it already was hard to find people. It's really become a challenge to kind of combat that. And um, on the plus side for teachers, I guess, is it's really become incumbent upon us as building leaders to really make extra efforts to attract people to stay, to find reasons for people to not leave. Obviously, folks, "Oh, it's going to shorten my commute." I can't compete with that. I don't have control over the salary, so I can't compete with that. But just things like overall climate in your building, and recognizing people and appreciating people, and just trying to make sure they know that they're an important part of your school. I think goes a long way with a lot of folks. Teachers certainly don't get into the business for the pay, but just trying to go out of your way to do things to to make the idea of leaving less attractive, I guess.
And some of those factors that we've talked about over the years with principles and longevity. One of those main ones is commuting distance. How long does it take you to get to and from work? Major factor. In fact, that was a top three. In a lot of the research that I had personally done for my dissertation, and over the past 2 years in particular, I've lost teachers for that reason. And there's a quality of life factor too. I think a lot of
Sure.
people emerged from COVID thinking, okay, there's so many different aspects to my life. Teaching's only one of them. Maybe it's a slight pay cut. Usually it's not anymore though, because like you said, districts are offering more years of service than they did in the past to attract teachers to come to their area, to their districts, and really looking for those hard to fill spots there. So those quality of life pieces, I don't want to say they're more important necessarily than money, but given the and speaking Pennsylvania strictly, given the pension scenario, how much that's changed, and just life post pandemic, that's a major factor now. Like you said, that's the
Yeah.
point you were making. So it is like being a valued free agent. You have options. It's just, and I think I would imagine it's just as difficult to leave a place and start at a new place as it's
Sure.
always been. But
Yeah.
those, if the intrinsic value is enough, then people are going to make a change. So, and like you said, it puts the onus on building administration and your building leadership to kind of say, okay, what is important to our people now. And there's a difference between the people who've been there for 20 and 30 years and our teachers who have been there between 1 and 10 years. And,
Right.
and some things I think are more important than other pieces, depending on who you are.
And if you look at the front end of it, like where the problem's originating is there's fewer going into the profession, overall. I mean, we've seen a number of times just the data for Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania has a lot of really solid, colleges for producing teachers with certificates, and the number of certificates, I should have done some prep work for the show, I guess, and I can rattle it off. But the number of certificates they're kicking out in Pennsylvania has been on a decline. It's been on a pretty steady decline. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's other jobs that maybe are more attractive. There's things about teaching that, people don't want the hassle and having to deal with, certainly, because there's a lot of parts of the job that have become challenging, including dealing with knucklehead principals. But there's a lot of things that, are making it less attractive and less interesting for people. So then there's fewer people getting into the profession, which creates that vacuum, and people are going to start being free agents and going other places. But the main reason I wanted to bring this up is fewer teachers means fewer principals. And that, as we know, is a huge, huge issue because the building principal, is one of the largest factors in the success of a school. And if that continues on the downward trend that it's been headed on lately, it's really going to get difficult to find quality people to run schools if it's not already, to be honest.
Yeah, and we have spoken about this topic, and I believe we've presented talking quite a bit about
Yeah.
the principalship and how do you attract good people to come over to do the part of the job that we do. And there's sometimes a negative connotation. If you've gone to the dark side. That's always been a Star Wars reference that a lot of people have made there. But we know for research and statistics based that the building principal, the longer that the principal's there, and the harder they work to get the right people in those seats, that's what makes a lot of the difference in the kind of success that you're going to have academically, socially, emotionally, behaviorally, all those things, right? So if you if we can't find principals, whether it's to build the baseline to start, hey, dean of students, assistant principal, principal, then how are we going to have principals achieve longevity in their buildings to where they can actually really start seeing success? Where you've hired a good number of that staff, where the vision is clear, everyone's moving and rowing in the same direction when you don't even have enough candidates to fill positions. And that becomes a big question because then what do you do? If you don't have a good viable candidate, how long can you go without filling one of those principal seats before it's untenable? Do you settle? We always say for hiring a teaching position, we should never settle. So
Right.
what do you do? How do you solve that problem? I don't know. It's a tough, tough thing right now.
And it really, focuses the importance on something you and I have also talked a lot about, and that's the need to grow your leadership tree to bring up new aspiring administrators. It's really incumbent upon us. Something I was taught very early on by my mentor. that it's really important to identify both for the good of your school, right? Identify future leaders, even if they're teacher leaders and they don't become administrators, but also encouraging people to enter the profession. Something we do in Downingtown, we run that Aspiring Principals Academy, something I'm pretty proud of that, we've been involved in, is just trying to attract people to the job because yeah, there is a lot of negative publicity about the job. How many times over the course of a week do you hear somebody say, I don't know how you do your job, I couldn't do your job? And I always try to come back at that and say, no, I think you could, or, there's a lot of upside to the job, or, trying not to have the negative spin, right? We've, again, going back years and years, talked about the way principles are portrayed and just the negative connotation with the job. So it's super important. Any principals who are listening out there, it's incredibly important for you as a building leader to identify and promote and encourage the future leaders of our schools. It could be the future leader of your school for when you move on one day. But certainly, there's a need out there for great leaders.
the, we have to touch on that pop culture piece because it's a repeating prophecy over and over and over again, right? We've been talking about this for 13 years now, and if you look at the television and the movies coming out today and still on today, it's still
Yeah.
the stereotype of the principal, with the exception of the Black Lightning show from CW from a few years back, which might have been the best of all in terms of how good it could be, when you really do accentuate the leadership piece, versus what we've seen today. And there was a movie this summer called Weapons that was very popular, and the principal of the school was, while a nice person, was depicted as being inefficient, ineffectual, right? So even in that, a movie that was really kind of keen and like current on subjects, it still got it wrong. You know what I mean? So, and you've talked before about Abbott Elementary, and my sister is currently like binging the earlier seasons of that.
Yeah.
While
Yeah.
while the principal in that show is hilarious,
I love
could there
her.
be a worse, right? But could there be a worse?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
shooting all the things it's the Michael
Yeah. Yeah.
Scott slash. Oh,
It
it's
is. It is. Although there's just there's sometimes where she says things and you're like, oh, well, I kind of see that. So it's hard to not totally relate with her. But yeah, this is just
yeah.
a fantastic character. And yeah, it's just it's a shame. It's a shame that there's been this for so long, just been this mentality. And it's funny because I think it kind of swings the other way when you move into central office and you go back to being the superintendent and the smart
Sure.
one and the one that's in charge of everything. So it's that middle management piece, right? The teachers are put high on a pedestal. The superintendents are, well, the superintendents catch a lot of it too. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel because I'm a principal that we're kind of in that valley there where it's like, oh yeah, and the principals too.
One of the nice things I think that we've been fortunate to work with the Pennsylvania Principals Association, and they've recognized this issue and the pipeline. In fact,
Yeah.
you were president of that organization for for a nice little term there. Unfortunately, it was during the COVID times, but things were established, like the aspiring principals kind of carried over to being, from a PA principal's perspective, something that they're
Yeah.
trying to, hey, if you're interested, we're going to do some webinars, some Q&As, things like that, to try to get people talking about
Yeah,
it.
and it's
And
important to I'm sorry, I just would say it's important
no,
to separate fact from fiction. That's why it's important. You don't want to go out and portray the job as something that it's not. Oh, hi, doggy. There's a little doggy in the corner.
Benji,
You don't want to go out
yeah,
and portray the job as something that it's not, but you need to separate fact from fiction because I think there's just a lot of things that aren't accurate about the job that kind of dissuade people from pursuing it.
absolutely. John, speaking of the Pennsylvania Principals Association, I feel like there's a big shout out we have to give in during
So
this
yeah,
episode.
yeah, yeah. When you talk about a shortage, when you talk about people that are hard to come by, people that are hard to find, you and I both agree. I know that there's a principal in the Bald Eagle Area School District,
That's it.
Wingate Elementary, I believe.
Believe
Jim
so. Mm-hmm.
Orchowski, our buddy Jim Orchowski's retiring after a great career. And boy, Jim, if you're watching this, I've told you multiple times just what a great inspiration you are, what an amazing principal you are. Just we're going to miss him in our profession, and I'm sure his school's going to miss him a lot. But just people like that are really, really difficult to find these days, and our profession's at a loss for not having him in it anymore.
And we affectionately call Jim Big O in our principal text thread that we maintain there. And I couldn't have said it any better than you did, John. One of the most positive leaders I've ever encountered. He's been on the show before. It was many years
Yeah,
ago, but he
many
has
years
been.
ago. Yeah.
And we were joking. We're going to need to do like an 8-part docu series to document his career. So Jim, you're going to have some time on your hands coming up. Why not?
So while we're talking about
Jim's
great
not answering.
athletes, well, speaking of great, incredible athletes like the great Tim Warchowski, who played for the Red Flash of is it St. John? No, not St. John's. What's the college that he played? Oh, darn it! I just know their mascot's the Red Flash. Sorry, Jim. Anyway, bad transition into athletics, but we're going to talk a little bit just about. Nick did a post recently. For those not in the Philadelphia area, this is, by the way, a coincidence that we both wore our Philly garb for the podcast. We didn't plan this,
2 weeks in a row.
but we had the planets aligned last night, and unfortunately, in typical Philly fashion, the planets aligned in a negative way. But we had the Phillies playing in a playoff game, the Eagles playing on Thursday Night Football, the Flyers playing their season opener, all on the same night, and this led to a Spirit Day, which I'm sure many schools in the area had. And Nick, you had an interesting conundrum that you were presented with on Spirit Day.
It was a very difficult conundrum, and one that, like you were saying, all educators across the country can relate to. So the issue in Philadelphia last evening or yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, was we had the Phillies in a do or die playoff situation, National League Division Series, playing the Dodgers, down 2 games to 1, a must win. Well, the problem was we were kind of hoping, I guess, it didn't come to this. So one of our teachers had planned a Spirit Day for the Eagles, who were playing Thursday Night Football on Amazon and Fox. So we literally had the issue of Eagles, assigned Spirit Day, Phillies do or die, and they're out. And, which John had to remind us, unfortunately, because I should have known, Philadelphia Flyers were playing as well. So the decision I made was I went with the classic Darren Dalton jersey. A lot of the kids didn't know who Darren Dalton was. It's fine. And then for the hat, instead of going Phillies hat, I went with the salute to service Eagles hat. I felt like I represented both, but more for the Phillies because they were in the playoff do or die situation. I felt like it was enough for the Eagles because they were playing the Giants, and there's no way we're going to lose to the Giants. I couldn't have been more wrong.
Shocker.
I guess I made the wrong choice because we lost. Both situations horribly.
Yeah. I went straight Phillies for the playoff game just because I felt like we needed the mojo, and I was a little more focused on the Phillies at the time. I don't know what to say other than you're right. I think this is a cool part of the education profession now. This seems to be much more common. I can't imagine. I don't remember ever when I was a kid, my teachers doing Spirit Days and wearing things like that to school. But it is a cool part and another way to improve the climate in your building and make sure people feel, welcomed and appreciated and everything is allowing Spirit Days like that. And yeah, it gets interesting, especially when, you call it Philly Spirit Day. And then I had a kid at my school that had a Dodgers jersey on. So I was like,
fantastic.
that's not cool, dude. That's why you're doing that. So, but it makes it fun. It makes it fun around the school. I actually chastised my lunch. I had cafeteria duty, and I said anybody that's wearing Phillies or Eagles gear or Flyers gear can get in line first. And only about 4 kids stood up. I'm like, what is going on?
Cool.
Like, there's not enough of you representing the team. So I gave them a hard time about it, and I guaranteed them a win. And of course, that came and backfired on me, and they gave me a hard time about that today. That Dr. Russell, I thought you said the Phillies were going to win, so I had to live with that today. But yeah, good times in Philadelphia. Good time to be a Philadelphia sports fan.
To make it even worse, John, since we talked about the fantasy football, my induction into the world of fantasy football. Not only did the Giants cremate us, but one of my bench players is Wan'Dale Robinson, who I didn't even think about starting, and he wound up scoring like 35 fantasy points yesterday. So
that's the worst
Lord,
part. That's the worst part. Not to circle back to fantasy football. We should have talked about this last week. That is the worst part about fantasy football, is when you don't start somebody and they go off and they go crazy, and it's usually a guy whose name I don't even know who that is. I mean, I'm not a big football fan. I'm a pretty good football fan, but I never heard that guy's name before in my life, and he puts up 30 points. I had on
Yep.
my team Cam Scatabo, so I was pretty excited to see he put up a lot of points last night. I got that guy right at the beginning of the season because I knew he was going to be something special. So unfortunately
You
for the
called that one
Eagles,
for
he was
sure.
last night. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
And
Speaking of
we're playing
something
each other this
special,
week, actually.
oh,
Right?
are we?
We're actually, yeah. I think we're actually against each other this week, which is hilarious.
Well, you know what?
Last.
I have Cave Scatabo in my family league. I don't have him in the league that
Oh,
you
in
and I are in
ours.
together.
Okay.
He's
Ooh.
in my family league. Yeah.
All right.
So
Well,
you
that's a
dodged
good
a
thing then.
bullet there. Yeah. Good
I
for
do have
you.
to say this though. My last comment, then we can move on to our final topic. I did. I'm loath to admit I enjoyed the post game with the Giants quarterback Scadaboo, and
Yeah.
like that was fun.
Jackson Dart. Yeah.
That was fun. Like that was watching. That was almost like watching pro wrestling. You know what I mean? Like those
Yeah.
guys were just so into it.
I've scrolled past it on social media a number of times already today. I just can't bring myself to watch it. I'm too much in the dumps about the Phillies, I think.
Yeah,
But hey, let's
yeah.
go Flyers, right?
That's Flyers and then Sixers, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Well.
Well, we've talked about some phenomenal athletes tonight, John, and that brings us to there is one more athlete we have
Yes.
to discuss because John and Nick, guess what we did? We went back to the movies, folks, and it's been a while. I can't remember when was the last
Yeah.
movie we've been to.
John and Nick at the movies. Oh man, you got to go back
Woo!
to like probably Marvel stuff, Avengers stuff. Might have been the
Yeah,
last
and
time.
we've done the Avengers movies. We did Lincoln way
Hmm.
back when Daniel Day
Oh
Lewis played
yeah,
Lincoln. But anyway,
yeah, yeah.
John had brought it up. He said, "Hey, Rock's out with a new movie. He's getting some Best Actor buzz in a movie called The Smashing Machine." About Mark Kerr, who was a UFC Pride MMA fighter back in the 90s and early 2000s, Trailblazer. And this movie was exciting for me for a number of reasons, John. One, we've got The Rock playing a real life role where he's trying to take an artistic turn to a certain, to a degree. Like this is that it's an artsy type film feel. Obviously, for those if you don't know, when I was a pro wrestler, my trainer was Afa Anawahi, the Wild Samoan. That's The Rock's uncle. All the Samoans related, so we're always pulling for The Rock. But on top of that, I'm a huge MMA fan, and at that time, the documentary on this movie came out in the early 2000s, where they made a documentary on our man Mark Kerr. So we I got a documentary that I loved, one of HBO's first documentaries, a topic I love, and The Rock all in one. So this was going to be great, right?
Yeah. So admittedly, I don't know nearly as much about all of that as you do. You, in fact, I think introduced me to MMA. I didn't know a whole lot about it, but have become a huge fan. From 2010 on. I didn't know this guy, Mark Kerr. I had never heard of him. I didn't, so I did do before the movie. I did a little bit of research, a little bit of, find out a little bit more about him. Watched a couple of YouTube videos and everything just to find out more about him. Really, really interesting life. But also the other thing was, the first couple of times I saw the trailer, I was like, who is that? I was like, who, what
Yeah.
actor did they find to play? Because I'm like, is that The Rock? It looks like The Rock. I'm not sure. So the makeup on him was pretty good. Now, admittedly, let me say something, and you're probably not gonna be happy with me. I'm not a big Dwayne Johnson fan. I'm a big Rock fan. I'm a big The Rock fan. Dwayne Johnson, the actor, not a big fan, but he was phenomenal. He was absolutely fantastic in this movie. And there's a lot of things that I'm sure we're going to talk about the movie itself. But I thought his performance was really, really great. And I'm saying that, prefacing that by saying I've never really liked him as an actor, but he was just fantastic in that movie.
Yeah, and I concur. I think the two best things about the movie in its entirety were The Rock and Emily Blunt's performance.
Yeah,
I felt like they both really brought a lot of life to those characters in a film where it wasn't necessarily directed towards any one subgroup, really. You know what I mean? Like it
right,
wasn't for
right.
hardcore MMA fans. They already
Hmm.
saw the documentary. If you're a Dwayne the Rock Johnson fan, like you said, like you might even not have known that was him in the trailers because it got a lot of promotion, but not big blockbuster promotion. So it was it's a different type scenario going into the movie, and I agree. Those two performances, in addition to there were so many awesome athletes. Alexander Usyk, the heavyweight champion of the world, playing one of the MMA fighters. Ryan Bader playing Mark Coleman, Kerr's best friend. So there was a lot
And
of
who's the guy that played himself? Who's the older guy that played
oh my
himself?
god, yeah, Bass Rutten, right, who was a one of the original, big personality MMA guys. He was like jujitsu. He did Muay Thai, a lot of the kicking and striking. He taught Mark Kerr how to strike, which he stood out for that reason. But he played himself in this
Yeah,
movie 20 times.
that guy's such a badass. He played a younger version of himself and pulled it off.
Yes, it's insane how good Bass Rutten
Yes.
looks. And he played a serious role in this film, whereas most of what you see on camera from him is more of the
Yeah.
entertainment factor and aspect. Now, with that being said, let me just offer my biggest criticism of the movie, and I know this is obviously a different thing for both of us
No
because we haven't
spoilers.
seen the no spoilers,
No
but
spoilers. Okay.
having seen the documentary and really having loved the documentary, I guess I was expecting some of the feel and the characterization of the documentary. I felt like it stayed too close to trying to be the documentary in a lot of
Hmm.
ways.
Hmm.
And for me, that kind of took me out of the movie quite a bit as I'm
Right.
watching things that almost shot exactly as I saw
Yeah.
them in the documentary.
See, it was all
So
new for
that
me, so I didn't see that.
yeah, so
Yeah.
and that, like I said, I don't think a lot of people are, have seen that documentary or are huge fans of it, but that was definitely one of the things that I struggled with throughout the movie. And then we talked. One of the points I wanted to bring up that you mentioned, and I don't know that I would have thought of this otherwise, but they really did take a spin on the issue of codependency in relationships and what's typically seen as a male role versus a female role in a relationship. It felt like there
Yeah.
was some big flip flopping that you don't normally get in a big budget, movie like this one. I think you hit on that really well.
Yeah, and without going into too much detail and spoiling things, I mean, there's a mental health component to that too, and just how he felt he was supposed to act. You know what I mean? Like I really got that vibe from him. The character, I mean, not Dwayne Johnson, but like the he said to his girlfriend, that this is what I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm doing the things as a man I'm supposed to do, and things like that. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but it kind of resonated with me. Not that I have nearly the issues that he had, but just the mentality, the idea that, as the man of the household, the provider, not to be sexist in any way. And I always feel like I
No,
gotta preface these things and not just say how I feel, but like just the things you take on, the things you take on, the responsibilities you take on as a husband, particularly, and he was the provider. I mean, that's just a fact. He was the provider in that relationship, and he felt that pressure, he felt that strain, and she wanted to help him. She wanted to assist him, and he kind of pushed her away, and that was for whatever reason, kind of revealed a little bit just about the dynamic between the two of them. So I thought that, to your point about their acting, I thought that was really well done.
yeah, and again, it's not something that they beat you over the head with. And I guess if I'm levying another criticism, I don't feel like they really beat too much of anything over our heads. And I'm not saying that a movie needs to do that, but there were times where I kind of felt like a little bit of drift, sort of like, well, what are we? What's the point? What are we? Are we supposed
Yeah,
to be focusing on the fact of what he's going through as the athlete and how he trailblazed the sport and how the sport worked against him in a lot of ways? Are we supposed to be
right.
focusing on the relationship between those two, the relationship between Coleman and Kerr, and the brotherhood of,
Yeah,
the bond in battle and that type of trauma? Um, I guess there were just kind of times where it felt a little kind of like adrift, know,
right.
and not necessarily. Uh, Again, not that a movie has to always have like a drive. I'm driving this point home or this message home. But when you get to the towards the end of the movie, it's based on a real story. So
Right.
do you get a Hollywood ending, or do you get how it really happened, or what are they going to focus on?
Right. Right.
And that's I don't know. I'm not sure if it stuck the landing for me. But again, like you were saying, those performances were amazing.
Yeah. I think going to see it just for those performances is worthwhile. I get you to your point. The style of the movie and some of the direction they took, I struggled with. I did watch his most recent Joe Rogan appearance, just because I'm
Okay.
really interested in the guy now. And I just love his like spirit, his motivational attitude, his enthusiasm. He's just one of those people like Jim Orchowski, who we mentioned earlier, just has that positive outlook, just wants to, make the world a better place. Like you just get a feeling that the guy just, you know what I mean? Like wants to make a difference, wants to have a positive impact on things. And people that are like that, just I find very inspirational. So his most recent Rogan, I think it was from like a month or so ago. It wasn't very recent, but they were talking. The movie hadn't come out, and they were just talking about how cool it is to have The Rock playing you, and they had a really cool conversation just about the whole thing. So it was pretty neat to see.
Yeah, and it's with Rogan being as connected to an understanding of combat sports as he is. I
Yeah,
can
they had
imagine
an old
just
picture. They had an old picture of the two of them from when Rogan first started doing the MMA color commentary. And
right.
there was a picture of Rogan like with a microphone interviewing him, and Rogan looked like a pup, like he was, I think it was the early two, it might have been like '05, '06, it's been close to 20 years probably. And he looked like he did in the movie, when in the old picture, because he's a lot smaller now. Obviously, he's an older gentleman, you
Oh
can't
yeah.
keep up that size. But he looked like he did it that the Rock portrayed him in the movie, so it's pretty cool to see.
So I think, John, when we started the podcast originally, way back when, our goal was to get Todd Whitaker on the podcast, which we
And we
did,
did.
and we did. Look, we don't want The Rock, no, but how
That would
about
be
Mark
crazy.
Kerr, right?
Or
Like,
Jocko
let's
Willie.
see. We're...
Jocko Willing turned us down, so Jocko Willing's not going to be on either.
That's
But
true.
not Joe
That's true.
Rogan. Joe Rogan's too high. But well, Mark Kerr's going to be kind of hot right now, so maybe we
That's
can
true.
try and catch him. When a lot of this dies down. I don't think we're going to be able to book him anytime in the near future, especially if Rock gets nominated for an Academy Award and everything. I'm sure that'll just start this all over again. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Maybe we should pick a new one to pursue. That was kind of what kept us going last time was trying to
I think we
find,
should.
somebody that was our that we would, for lack of a better term, stalk. I think would be the
Yes.
way to put it, in a
Yes.
nice way, in the
Some
nicest way
some
possible.
people. Yeah, some people might call it stalking.
We'll have to
And
think
look,
of
hey,
somebody.
we don't get offended, right, John? I haven't held a grudge against Jocko Willing for the
Not at
past 10 years
all.
because
Not at all.
he
No,
turned
he,
us down.
he he
Yeah.
turned us down. You just know the exact date that it occurred and exactly what was said. But other than that, no, no, not at all.
Details. Details.
Every once in a while, I send Nick a clip of Jocko Willing, and I can just hear him going, "Rrr."
No,
That guy.
that guy. Darn it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, well, John, another amazing episode of the Rockstar Principles podcast. It's exciting to be back. We are doing our best to try to, find a little traction on all the different social medias. But if you would follow us, give us a like, give us a share, either on any of the podcast platforms, that would be great. But in particular, YouTube is apparently where the action's at, folks. So you could find our audio version on YouTube, and you can find the video version on YouTube as well. Subscribe to our channel, give us a like, just put Rockstar Principles YouTube, and check us out.
All that stuff. And, maybe in the comments, ideas for topics for us to talk about. You can do that in
Continue.
the comments, comments on YouTube or TikTok. Anything you'd like to, hear us opine on, we'd be happy to bring up, I'm sure, especially if it has to do with either education and or MMA fighting, one of those two
Yeah,
topics.
but one and the same.
Yeah,
All right, we'll see.
we're
We'll see you next
Philadelphia
time.
sports.
Yeah, that too. See you later,
See you
guys.
guys.
Boom.